Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different and I think truly fascinating. We're taking a whole stack of these really intense, high stakes headlines from the Philippines, the major issues that are dominating the conversation right now. We're going to filter all of it through a specific cultural lens.
And that lens is a single Hiligaynon term, Pagka-alalang.
Right.
For anyone listening, this is so much more than just a word. It's a powerful concept. It really encapsulates the deep concern, intense vigilance, and almost this active state of apprehension. It just fundamentally defines the mindset of so many citizens, particularly in the Ilonggo regions, as they try to navigate this nonstop flow of national news.
So our mission today is to move beyond just, reading the headlines. We're using Pagka-alalang as our framework to try and understand the true societal weight of these issues. We want to see how this constant state of vigilance shapes how an average person reacts to policy and crisis. What are they really watching out for?
It's vital context. I mean, Pagka-alalang is rooted in lived experience. It's an apprehension that stems from, well, historic vulnerabilities to poverty, unreliable infrastructure, periodic failures in governance. So when a major story breaks, this deep concern is the psychological baseline. It's not a passive, I hope things get better feeling.
No, not at all.
It's an active, I must watch this closely because my safety, maybe my livelihood, depends on the outcome.
Okay, so let's get into the source material. We've got 6 diverse, high-stakes national issues that are creating this landscape of concern. Our stack includes, the politically charged flood control controversy, the high-profile POGO and governance case involving Mayor Guo.
That's a huge one.
Huge. Then the latest on the appeal to the International Criminal Court, the very real threat from the dengue outbreak, the impact of Typhoon Verbena, and finally, the one that hits everyone, the increase in diesel prices.
So you've got a mix of everything: political accountability tests, natural crises, pure economic pressure, public health threats. And our goal, our analytical goal, is to connect these 6 national issues specifically to the 3 core areas that really drive Pagka-alalang for the Ilonggo citizen:
Which are?
chronic economic hardship, persistent public safety threats, and the foundational underlying need for good, trustworthy governance.
Okay, so let's unpack that first half of our dive. The issues that directly challenge that core pillar of good governance and really test public trust.
Right, because when that trust erodes, whether it's through scandal or just perceived incompetence, the Pagka-alalang around leadership, it just increases exponentially. These first 3 issues we're about to discuss, they fundamentally question the effectiveness and really the honesty of the whole system.
But let's start with the flood control controversy. Now, on paper, this sounds technical, right? Infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
But this is a classic, painful example of potential governance failure with direct consequences. Tell us the critical details here.
The specifics are just so crucial. This isn't about a delay in the work. We are talking about alleged widespread collusion between regional contractors and potentially government officials.
Collusion.
Yes. On billion-peso flood control projects, particularly in the Western Visayas, a region that's constantly threatened by flash flooding. So if these massive multi-year projects are compromised, using substandard materials, maybe ghost projects, diverted funds, it means lives are immediately at risk the next time a big storm hits.
So the deep concern here is immediately dual-layered. It's hitting on public safety because the whole point of the project is gone, and it hits on accountability because public money was allegedly just wasted or stolen.
Exactly.
Huh.
The citizen has to maintain Pagka-alalang because their physical safety relies on the honest execution of those government projects. They're forced to be vigilant over basic competence.
Okay, moving to the second issue, one that's dominated headlines, not just locally, but globally, the POGO and Guo case. This is so much more complex than a zoning dispute. It's this whole narrative touching on legality, public order, foreign relations, and that fundamental question of institutional integrity. Why does this case specifically fuel such intense Pagka-alalang?
Well, what's fascinating here is just how multi-layered the concern is. It ties local governance directly to national security and legality. I mean, the allegations here, they go so far beyond standard administrative oversight. They question the very citizenship and legitimacy of highly placed figures like Mayor Guo. The investigations touch on potential human trafficking, organized crime, and large-scale corruption, all linked to the POGO industry.
So if the very mechanisms that are supposed to verify identity, citizenship, the legal operation of these massive businesses, if all that is compromised, the citizen has to wonder, what can I trust?
Precisely. The whole investigation becomes this high-profile litmus test for the transparency, the strength, and, critically, the incorruptibility of government institutions, from the municipal level right up to national security offices. When you have questions about the integrity of someone holding public office, that demands deep public vigilance.
And then we shift to the highest levels of global justice, the ICC appeal decision. When we talk about this, we are squarely in the context of accountability and the rule of law, just on an international stage.
Right. The ICC appeal decision, it all relates back to accountability for past high-level anti-drug operations. And while it might seem distant from the daily concerns of, say, an Ilonggo commuter,
That's what I was going to ask.
the outcome really informs the citizen's sense of justice and institutional strength. It asks a fundamental question. Is there any mechanism, domestic or international, that can enforce accountability for the most powerful figures?
Okay, I have to challenge that just a little. The ICC decision, it's global, it's high-level policy. How does that truly translate to the lived daily vigilance of a local farmer who's worried about diesel costs? Are they really connecting those two dots?
And that's the beautiful and painful connection Pagka-alalang makes.
Yeah.
Look, when you have high-profile accountability cases, whether it's the ICC appeal or the POGO investigation, and they fail to deliver justice or transparency, it creates this general atmosphere of impunity.
An atmosphere of impunity.
Yes. And that feeling, it trickles down. If high officials are seen to be above the law, the average person loses faith that the government will enforce honest flood control contracts or regulate prices fairly. The vigilance becomes a generalized mistrust of power itself.
That makes perfect sense. So these three issues, the compromised infrastructure, the POGO integrity test, and the ICC accountability question, they collectively suggest this fundamental weakness at the top. And that instability is what drives the necessity for this deep concern.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because now we move from policy and these big governance scandals to the issues that hit the average citizen's daily life. We're talking about their wallet, their immediate health, and their physical security. This is section 2, immediate hardship.
These are the tangible stresses. Governance issues, they might generate distrust and, political pagka-alalang. But these next three issues, they generate immediate physical survival-related stress.
Let's start with the increase in diesel prices. It sounds like a global market issue, but the specific context in the Philippines, especially for agriculture and fisheries, is just devastating. What's the immediate effect here? This is, by far, the clearest link to immediate economic hardship. Diesel is the engine of the Philippine economy, especially outside of the major urban centers. It powers the fishing boats, the trucks that move goods, the generators you need when the power fails.
And the jeepneys, all the public transport.
All of it. So when diesel prices rise significantly, it's not just a transportation tax, it's an immediate spike in the cost of food, of fishing, of commuting, right?
Absolutely. For the average Ilonggo citizen, this isn't some abstract inflation statistic. It is a direct, immediate reduction in their purchasing power. A farmer's cost to operate jumps instantly. A market vendor's transport costs rise, so they have to raise prices or just absorb that loss.
Exactly. The vigilance here is purely defensive. It's Pagka-alalang focused on protecting one's own economic security, their basic survival budget, against forces they just can't control.
And now we pivot to the destructive power of nature with the impact of Typhoon Verbena. We have to focus on the scale of disruption here and how a storm like this exposes all the existing vulnerabilities.
Typhoon Verbena was a devastating event, and it really showcased how poorly prepared so many coastal and low-lying communities still are. Natural calamities, they just expose these severe vulnerabilities in housing, infrastructure, social safety nets. When a typhoon hits, the immediate deep concern is physical. Are my family and I safe? But the longer-term Pagka-alalang centers on resilience.
And what specifically fuels that long-term concern? Is it just the storm itself, or is it the institutional response to it?
It's the institutional response. The deep concern focuses on the adequacy of the disaster preparedness infrastructure. Are the evacuation centers safe? Was there enough warning? And critically, the fairness and speed of the recovery efforts. If aid is slow or if essential services aren't restored quickly, the constant threat of the next storm becomes this profound source of anxiety. It drives vigilance related to survival and government competence in a crisis.
Finally, let's discuss the dengue outbreak. It's not driven by politics or weather, but it represents a huge, ongoing public health crisis that really tests government effectiveness at the local level.
It directly concerns public safety, but through the lens of community health. A widespread dengue outbreak is a silent threat. It disproportionately affects children and the working poor. The deep concern here is triggered by fear of illness combined with a strain on resources.
And what's the tipping point? What determines whether that concern turns into full-blown Pagka-alalang?
It's determined by the effectiveness of the local public health initiatives. Is the government funding awareness campaigns? Are they effectively mobilizing anti-mosquito efforts? Is healthcare accessible and affordable? If public health systems are seen as slow, under-resourced, or just ineffective in containing the spread, the resulting deep concern is immediate and intensely personal. It's a threat to family health, to community stability, and it demands that citizens take vigilant preventative action themselves.
So if we synthesize these three immediate threats, the soaring fuel costs, the recovery from a massive storm, and a serious disease outbreak, how do they define the lived experience of Pagkalang?
They shift the focus of vigilance. They move it from this abstract political watchfulness to immediate survival. These issues are unavoidable. They're tangible. They create stress because they directly determine whether you can afford to feed your family, whether your home will survive the next rainy season, and whether your children will stay healthy. Pagka-alalang in this context is a reaction not just to policy failure, but to the constant struggle against this pervasive vulnerability.
So what does this all mean? We've covered everything from international legal accountability with the ICC right down to the direct economic hit of rising diesel prices, all filtered through this Ilonggo lens of Pagkalang, this deep, active concern.
We've established that the 6 issues we've talked about are not just isolated headlines. There are 6 interconnected pressure points that collectively feed this deep state of vigilance. They force citizens to take an active role in scrutinizing their environment and their leaders.
And when we look at the whole spectrum of concern, we see that Pagka-alalang is essentially fueled by the reality of vulnerability.
Exactly. When we talk about economic hardship, we are looking at the combined compounding impact of the rise in diesel prices, which affects everything, and the massive financial disruption from Typhoon Verbena, which forces costly recovery.
And for public safety, the vulnerability is exposed by the ongoing dengue outbreak, the physical risks from the compromised flood control projects, and the catastrophic failures exposed by the typhoon's impact.
And finally, that underpinning desire for good governance is constantly being challenged. This is where the questions of integrity come from the high-level POGO and GO case, the institutional accountability raised by the ICC decision, and the perceived systemic mismanagement highlighted by the flood control controversy.
So the major takeaway for you listening is this. Understanding a term like Pagkalang lets you move past just reading headlines as isolated facts. It provides the crucial emotional and cultural context you need to grasp the deep societal implications of the news. For many, the news isn't just information, it's a critical warning system that demands deep concern and responsive action.
It forces us to acknowledge that in vulnerable communities, being informed is not a passive activity at all. It's an active stance of vigilance, an ongoing internal dialogue about potential threats to your safety and your livelihood.
Our deep dive shows that being well-informed is an active stance of deep concern. It demands that you, the citizen, keep watch over those 3 critical areas: your safety, your finances, and your leaders.
And the final provocation for you, as a way to practice Pagka-alalang in your own life, is this. Take a moment to reflect. What is one local ordinance or one seemingly minor economic trend you read about this week, something you initially dismissed as small news, but which, when you view it through the lens of potential economic hardship or a threat to community safety, suddenly demands greater vigilance and informed action from you as a citizen? That transition from passive reader to active sentinel, that is the essence of Pagka-alalang.
A profound thought on the necessity of vigilance. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
Always a pleasure.